Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a new episode of Flesh Wound Farce, where we review and discuss your and our favorite comedy films. This is the world's first and only combination trivia host and professional wrestling announcer of Chilean descent that currently resides in Southern California, Ozzy V. And with me, as always, on this program, first in the Northern California Bay Area, world famous juggler Greg Larson. How you doing, Greg? You're getting your drugs dropped off right now from Colombia?
Look, we have quick expedited shipping. It's great. Yeah, sorry about that. They heard the show was going on. Everyone wants to be a part of it.
We should drive over now.
Yeah.
They just started recording. Go over now.
But yeah, things are good. Beautiful rainy days, enjoying the weather, playing games, watching football. Life's good, man. How are you doing, Ozzy?
Well, speaking of football, I sent you a text earlier this morning that I was having concerns. You have Mike Williams of the Chargers coming back from injury, and then you got Dameon Pierce going up against the Cowboys. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go with Mike Williams because they're going to need to pass against Miami, and Dallas is just going to dominate the Texans. When the Texans almost beat the Cowboys, holy cow. I thought I was on some sort of hard drug or something. It was very strange. So
speaking of your football trophy, looks like it's doing a Back to the Future thing where someone's messing with the timeline.
Oh,
it's
no.
disappearing.
Stop it. Stop. Don't you even allude to something like that happening. How dare you?
You're right. I see that now.
No, I'm not going to hold it like this the rest of the time to eliminate that kind of visualization. I gotta. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, also with us, Flesh Wound producer Todd.
And
Todd?
I'm doing all right. And just so people are like, what is Ozzy talking about? We are pre-recording this episode. 2/11.
Yes, that is true. I apologize. We are recording this episode on December 11th to get ahead of the holidays here. Let's see if that can do any.
Nope. Still good.
All right. Well, this is great. As I'm talking about fantasy football and the decision I'm making, you're telling me looks like that trophy behind you is disappearing. That doesn't do anything to my nerves. Ladies and gentlemen, the third voice you heard, Flesh Wound producer Todd. Have I introed you yet? Or did I'm freaking out because you allude to me losing this trophy. And I don't know how many times I've said, if I lose this thing, but I am glad that the decision I made between Mike Williams and Dameon Pierce did decide to pan out in my favor. But
that 49ers defense worked out well for you.
By a point at the end of the day. It was funny because it was the Eagles defense and the 49ers defense. Sorry, I can sense Todd's angst because he's so anxious to talk about this movie. I can sense it. Ladies and gentlemen, actually, before we jump into this review of Ghostbusters 2, I'd like to thank you for joining us on YouTube. If you happen to come across us, go ahead, hit the subscribe button. And if you are listening to us on the Spotify, thank you, and good morning or good afternoon, if that is more convenient for you. Now, this week, we are reviewing and discussing Ghostbusters 2, which was released on June 16th, 1989, rated PG, with a runtime of an hour and 48 minutes. Todd, do you have a trailer available?
No, sorry, it's not working this week.
How did I know?
All right, we'll do it. You see me roll my eyes the whole time.
At the stroke of midnight, on New Year's Eve of the last decade of the 20th century, America's largest city is about to pay for the nastiness of its inhabitants. When that day comes, when the slime starts to rise,
the Titanic just arrived.
When ghosts start arriving by the boatload,
We gotta find the guys.
there's only one thing to do.
Look out! Look out! Sometimes weird things happen. Someone has to deal with it. And who are you gonna call?
I haven't seen Ozzy laugh once. I'm just throwing that out there.
I have a smile on my face.
The superstars of the supernatural are back to nuke the spooks.
Two in the box!
Ready to go. We
be fast and they be slow.
Make some time.
Don't put any of those old cheap moves on me.
No.
It's different.
I have all new cheap moves.
Raise your spirit
If we don't do something by midnight, you will be remembered in history as the man who let New York get sucked down into the 10th level of hell.
and kick some slime.
Looks like a giant Jello mold.
I hate Jello. Oh, come on. There's always room for Jello.
Happy New Year!
Hose 'em.
Ghostbusters 2.
You're short, your belly button sticks out too far, and you're a terrible burden on your poor mother.
Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Sigourney Weaver, Harold Ramis, Rick Moranis, and Ernie Hudson in an Ivan Reitman film. Ghostbusters 2.
We're the best! We're the beautiful! We're the only Ghostbusters! We're back! Who you gonna call?
I gotta say this real quick, Ozzy. You know, the only time you laughed out loud was to a line that is far from evergreen. Like they're not. No, the kids today are gonna get the Jello line. That's not a. That hasn't been a catchphrase in like 20 plus years. So, just a
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've witnessed a first here. You've witnessed Todd, Flesh Wound producer Todd, reach a level of annoyance to where he takes a joke too literally and feels the need to.
Don't make
You
me
would
do
say-
it, Ozzy.
Listen.
Don't make
Hold on
me
a
do
second.
it.
Hold on a second. You had said, I'd just like to point out that Ozzy hasn't laughed once within 10 seconds. And I'd like to point out that had you played the trailer that's on the imdb.com profile of this movie, which is basically the commercial that airs in Dana Barrett's apartment, that is something that I laughed at. Because
But
it's
this is-
actually the whole commercial that's in the movie, but it's just the commercial by itself.
But you
when-
understand, this is the piece that was supposed to get you in the movie theaters. And I will tell you this right now. It did. That trailer.
I know it got people into movie theaters. It didn't get people to laugh. Sure. No, seriously. Like it. I mean, we'll
Wait,
get into
you
initial
love this
thoughts.
movie. You gotta go.
I
go,
do.
go.
No, I'm just jumping into initial thoughts right now. So check this out. Similar to my experience with the Indiana Jones films, where I saw Temple of Doom before I saw,
The good
in fact, Raiders of Lost Ark. Raiders Lost Ark was the last one I saw, where I had actually seen Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, then Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? So a lot of people hated Temple of Doom. Todd, I know you loved it, right?
Oh my God, masterpiece.
Now, but a lot of people didn't see that as their favorite of the trilogy. However, I was okay with it because that was the first one I saw. So going back to this, in 1991, Ghostbusters 2 was airing on the Disney Channel. And it was one of the first movies that I recorded on VHS because I was always watching the animated Ghostbusters, right?
Oh, the real Ghostbusters, not the
Right.
one.
Yeah. So it was airing on the movie was airing on the Disney Channel, and I remember specifically when I say this was the first movie I recorded. It wasn't just like, oh, I put it on 8 o'clock, whatever. I just let it record. Like when there was a commercial coming on, I'd hit the pause button on the VCR. Yeah, that
There we go.
I did. At like, what was it? 91, 84. I was like 6 or 7 years old doing this. And I started recording a whole bunch of movies that way. But so going through this movie, I remember specifically where the commercial breaks were and how each time I saw it, how the audio would shift a little bit. And I am so glad we got to review this at this, in this format, because I was paying a lot of attention and I think I picked out a joke, or I found a joke that was omitted from the Disney Channel version, which makes sense. So we'll get to that in the favorite parts moment, because it did make me have quite the chuckle. Greg, initial thoughts.
This movie, so the Ghostbusters series in general for me has been a confusing one, because when I like you, I watched the cartoon more and first, but the movies, I don't remember the first time. It was quite a while till I saw one of the movies in its entirety. So the two Ghostbusters films, because I'd catch bits and pieces on TV from time to time, like all kind of merged, and it took a while for me to understand which movie was which as a whole. So, this one's the bits that I remembered from it were stood out the most with Vigo and everything. And I even have a wonderful moment from there's a game called Burnout Paradise that when you crash and there's these buses that increase your multiplier. We used to have a bit that when you hit the bus, we said "All hail Vigo," and it was just an added wonderful moment tied to this film. But yeah, lots of good times. This movie, I think, is a true farce for the Ghostbusters films. If we were to think of one as more farcical than the other, this one definitely takes the cake.
Oh, I have to give thoughts. Jesus Christ.
And I mean, I know they're negative, but hey, tell people why you hate this movie. Well, I mean, initially,
it's a piss poor excuse of a sequel when you have a masterpiece to come to this. But no matter what you would have done after, it would have been hard. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I saw the original Ghostbusters in theaters opening day, and I saw the Ghostbusters 2 sequel opening day, of course. I'm very excited to see it because Ghostbusters is one of my favorite films. So even as a kid, it was like the soundtrack. It's a little too. It's 89, but it's very like that. Could have just played Ray Parker Jr.'s song, been happy. Okay, sorry, I'm just picking out things. Okay, this is the first time I've watched
Glenn Frey, Flip City, Bobby Brown. I mean, I understand, but I mean, I would think you'd be all about that. Like
the Bobby Brown song was good. Okay, this is the first time since probably this came out on video cassette. Maybe I probably did it then too. That I haven't watched Ghostbusters, then Ghostbusters 2. I just watched Ghostbusters 2. It helped the movie for me because I wasn't like, they were just so goddamn good like 2 minutes ago. So I think like that like just watching it, I had fun the first 2/3. Totally loses me in the last act. It just, yeah. And I was having fun. Then we got to that and I was like, yeah, I still don't like this.
Okay. It's funny you mentioned that because we're going to get into our favorite moments momentarily. But before I jump into that, I did forget to mention that this is written by Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd, directed by Ivan Reitman, starring the original cast: Ramis, Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, Sigourney Weaver, Annie Potts, Rick Moranis, and introducing Peter McNichol into the franchise. Wow, Todd, not a fan of Janos. Like, I think he's one of the highlights of this movie.
See, I think he's you know what? He's the second worst villain in Ghostbusters history. True, there's only 4 of them, but he's like neck and neck with the Ghostbusters reboot one. Like they're almost on par of how like I'm just like I don't care and they don't feel like a threat to me.
Then
Janos
you might
wasn't
as well
really a villain. He was like a henchman, if anything.
much like Renfield in Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it's
that's
more a
true.
henchman. And plus you could just say the worst because I mean, like, people can hate me for this, but that Ghostbusters 2016 version doesn't fit in the universe that we're talking about. So I'm
It
pretty sure
doesn't?
like Dan Aykroyd has a cameo as a cab driver. So
All
I mean,
of them are in it.
I mean, as cameos, but not like
Yeah.
as Venkman or like, an Afterlife or whatnot.
That's
but-
still better than this though.
No, I'll agree with you there. Because I will say that what's interesting is watching it now at this age and really trying to be critical of it is that, well, first off, the DVD that I had, there's an insert on the inside where they talk about it was supposed to be Reitman, Aykroyd, Ramis, and Murray. They all got together because they wanted to do another movie. They wanted to do something different. New story, new characters, right? But then the more they talked about it, they just ended up wanting to do this. So definitely, like, there was no, I guess, whereas you got a sense with the first one, there was a little bit more effort to be put in with the story and how everything was being presented. Like it had a certain, like, look at Gremlins and Gremlins 2. Whereas the first Ghostbusters had a certain element of just like seriousness of it. And Greg, to your point, this is almost a parody of the first,
Right.
just enhancing all the silly stuff about it. And Todd, to your point about 2/3, as I look at my list, and I even noted this when I got towards the end, is that I stopped writing down the things that were making me laugh around that 2/3 of the movie. But at the same time, is like I said, this was airing on the Disney Channel, so I think there might have been some sort of like, hey, let's make this a little bit kid friendly, and we could sell some toys, because they sold up. I mean, they saw what the cartoon was doing. I mean, how much they were able to sell pink slime because of that movie, And I will say another reason why I appreciate it is because the individual who plays Vigo, Wilhelm von Homburg, diehard terrorist.
Well, if we're just going to drop people, I'm next.
Oh, and I'm not done. I'm not
Okay.
done, because I'm also going to include the mother at the birthday, Mary Ellen Trainor, anchor Gail Wallens, also in Die Hard. Oh man, one of the reasons I love this movie, I think.
Well, I don't have a Die Hard one.
She was also the mother in Goonies, by the way, so
yes,
you can't get on my case about whatever.
Oh no! I'm just going to throw that.
I see the look on Greg's face.
This is why your trophy's disappearing, Ozzy.
Stop it.
And it's funny, interesting. You're wearing the Terminator jersey as well. With the whole time and yeah.
I also Kurt Fuller from No Holds Barred, everyone's favorite, doing his best Walter Peck impression and not succeeding.
And now, here's the interesting thing about that is, well, working at Disney, we had a manager that if you took Kurt Fuller's face and just like squeezed it, that's exactly what this guy looked like. And the way he talked was exactly like him. So you could talk about he's trying to do his best Walter Peck and is failing miserably at it. Like, sure. But for me, I see that guy in the back of my head like, man, every time it's this dude. I'm trying so hard not to say his name. I'm just like almost slipping out. I'm being very careful so Todd doesn't have to do any editing. But also just another fun thing is in the there's a computer when they're looking up the bio for Vigo, and they show Vigo's full name, and I actually pause it to read just to see if there's like any like fun Easter eggs when they're in there. So Vigo's name is actually Vigo von Homburg Dustorf, and von Homburg, actual last name of Vigo, used as the first name, and Dustorf is the first, or Dusendorf, the surname of the twins that played the baby Oscar.
Oh,
so
nice.
That was just like a fun, now going into the favorite moments, Todd, I want to hear you go first.
Mine's one line. It's one that Egon drops, and that is, I'd like to run some gynecological tests on the mother.
Who wouldn't? And that was what was omitted from the Disney Channel version.
There you go. Of course,
because I saw that version so many times that when that scene came up, it's like, this doesn't feel as familiar as the rest of the movie. And then the line happens, like, that's why.
Now the $1 million question: do you remember the looped line?
The looped?
What the replacement line was?
Oh no, I don't, because I don't remember that scene at all. I think they just from there they went from that, because it was her getting the stool sample or whatever,
right,
or telling it whatever, and then going into the street right after.
Looking at
it was like a 5-second scene that was cut.
Looking at the runtime at 148 to hit a 2-hour block on with the amount of commercials they want, they definitely would have.
Disney Channel did have commercials with this particular presentation at this time that they were.
Because they didn't always. I remember when they started.
Well, it was actual Disney animated, the classics, or like Brave Little Toaster or whatever. Those are always commercial free, but any live action movies always had commercials in them for other Disney Channel shows.
Maybe it was a licensing thing. Like they didn't put them on their own, but they put them on others. Like, because this is a Sony, man, I don't know.
I have no idea.
Now we just watch Disney Plus and we don't get Ghostbusters 2. They're smart.
Your negative energy is going to create some more pink slime in this world. And then we're all screwed thanks to Todd. All right, Greg.
Man, there's a few great moments that I love from this. Just some bad lines, which I love. But the part that cracked me up is Janusz. Like I loved so many of his moments, but there's a moment where he's like talking to Vigo and he goes, "Tell me what you need." He's like, "I am Vigo the Carpathian." He's like, "Yes, you said that already." Like that moment, I was like, "Oh yes, this like major, powerful, like omnipotent, like creature," and you're just like, "Yes, move along, come on."
It's very low key and subtle, very, very funny. A few things that I did want to point out is how good when we did Ernest Saves Christmas, and I talked about how Ernest reminds me of Bugs Bunny in terms of like just putting on a different costume. Like he just has all these costumes just ready to go and
Right.
has these different characters. The facial expression that Bugs would have, like when the "Are you serious?" look, like Bill Murray has that. Like that is the look of the human Bugs Bunny, like where Bugs breaks the fourth wall, can look at the camera and then just looks back at whatever he's focused on. I'm talking about the world of the psychic scene. But I did also I appreciated so much more this go around a couple of Egon's lines. The whole gag of him trying to produce an experiment on the couple that thinks it's there for marriage counseling. He said, "I've been gradually increasing the temperature." And then now my assistant's asking if they don't mind waiting for another half hour. And then you see the guy like freak out. Like something just made that funnier now. And when anytime he talked about like his parents' history, just in his manner of delivery was hilarious. I mean, there's just a lot of funny moments. I love the digging up the scene when they gotta, play their own characters in front of the cops or whatever. But lastly, when you think it's Ray asking Egon about how sure he is of something, Egon's response is the atomic weight of cobalt 58.9? That was the last thing I wrote. So I wanted to shout it out. Like, once you pass that point, that's when you can just expect it to go down on the humor end of it. But for me, what makes it fun is that I guess the story was so light that I grew attached to it as a kid. So I group it in like with the Goonies or something like that, right? I'm not like expecting a whole lot. It kind of leans more towards kid friendly as opposed to like, I guess, kid accessible. Like, so like Greg, to your point, when you talk about you have this ruler who's dictator, 105-year-old, his head died, whatever, when in the first you would not, like, nobody would talk to Gozer or treat Gozer that way. Like, you were afraid of Gozer,
right,
to a certain degree. So, but going back to, this was a farce of the original, so that makes sense on that aspect. Now, to your point, Todd, 2/3 really funny. That last third, it's just more of things wrapping up. Like, okay, we've exhausted all the jokes we wanted to do. Let's just go home now. So for that, I got to put it at a 3.5 because I still had fun with it. That first 2/3, I was laughing enough, but I still wanted to see how the movie ended. And I didn't mind sacrificing all these haha movies or haha moments leading up to it, laugh out loud moments leading up to it, and perfectly fine seeing the statue go across the city. And of course, a parody of itself, you have the Marshmallow Man, but at least this thing is just amusing to see. I mean, they had ILM doing this. Why not? This was just purely made for fun and to be more kid friendly, probably to sell more toys, but it's a 3.5 for me. It's going to be that way. Now, to go back, I'm pretty sure I rated Ghostbusters, the original, a 5. So I'm not saying this is as good. It's not as nearly as good, but it's still a fun time. I feel more comfortable watching this with when my nephews were younger at the time than I would the original.
Fair enough.
This movie, like you said, is a lot of fun. And there's moments that, like, just for the moment where he's talking to the baby, and he goes, "Oh, Oscar, you're named after a hot dog," or something along those lines. Like those kind of stupid, fun Bill Murray kind of moments were a lot of fun, and this group of people together is great. Janusz was fantastic, so I'm still giving it a 4. It's no Ghostbusters 1, but it's still a great time if you have fun. Todd.
Yeah, Todd hates fun.
I know this is a change. Well, I'm glad you both enjoy it so much. That's good. All right, so I'm going to rate it 2 times. If you watch the original Ghostbusters first, I give this half a star. If you don't, and you just watch it for what it is, I'm going to give it a 2.5. It's average.
Okay.
All right.
But it's grown on me, so that's a good thing. From that 0.5 to now I'm at a 2.5. I don't think it'll get much higher, but
Is it too clean?
I love the cartoon. There was a little bit of horror elements once in a while in the cartoon.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't have a problem with that. It is a little less hard edge, and that might have bothered me because I'm able to look at the movie and the cartoon separately. Like I could watch the RoboCop movie, and I didn't get the same thing from the RoboCop cartoon, but
Right.
So I'm able to separate it. I was 12 years old when this came out, so I don't know if I was just a little bit older.
Oh, dude. So okay, that age, like when you're going between 11, 12, 13, you're starting to try to distance yourself from the kid stuff and trying to embrace
I still watch the
at least
cartoon
I
religiously.
was. No. Well, I mean, okay. Well, no, for example, okay, but let me give you an example of when I was growing up and I was 10 years old, there was kids doing that because I was excited about Toy Story. And there was other kids who were like, that movie sucked. And I was like, what are you talking about? Buzz Lightyear was awesome. And they're like, no,
Right.
dude, you're a kid. I'm like, dude, we're 10. Like, what are you? 11? Ooh, but that's what I'm
Go
talking
pay
about.
taxes, old man.
But
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I don't know. At least when I was 12, I guess that I could, if I saw this when I was 12 after watching the original Ghostbusters, I'd probably be equally upset because you probably were just expecting more of the antics you saw in the original, but you wouldn't get anything close to a blowjob joke in the second movie.
No.
No. And you know what else? Maybe that is what's bothering me because I was going to say this earlier. It seems like Bill Murray went to an HR class or something compared to the first one.
Well, he forgot about it afterwards.
I'm just 89 in the movie. Don't you?
Yeah.
Fair
All
point.
right.
Well, that was Ghostbusters. It is not currently available streaming
Thank
anywhere,
God, thank you, Sony.
but it is available to rent. In fact, you could actually find the DVD version I have. A lot of Targets will constantly sell the two together. So if you're inclined to have a copy of these both together, check that out. It's a fun time if you haven't, but chances are if you're watching this right now, you've probably seen Ghostbusters 2. And probably depending on what age you were when you saw it will determine how you thought of it. I feel. Because Greg and I are around the same age, right? And we rated it roughly the same. Todd is old man and hates fun, so he rated it lower than us.
I was going to bring up the name of another person, and I'm still going to do it. Dan and Pugs. See, I did and Pugs are both your age and are both. No, actually, you know what? Dan is anti Ghostbusters 2. He also thinks that the girl one is better. Let that sink in for a moment.
Dan calls a beanie a
Dan,
winter
no.
cap.
Dan thinks the one with the women.
Dan thinks Brock
better
Lesnar
than
is a
this
legitimate animal.
And
Dan thinks Brock Lesnar is an animal. Brock Lesnar thinks he shouldn't go to a doctor. Brock Lesnar should go to a veterinarian. That's what Dan thinks. So you can't bring up Dan when these things have already been established. So what did Pugs is Pugs anti Ghostbusters too?
I think he's forgiving like you guys.
There you go. All right. Well,
Good man, Pugs.
you
He
can
doesn't
rent
like
it if you're
Return of
so
the Living
inclined.
Dead. So
You can rent this. You can purchase it. But that was Ghostbusters 2. Feel free to join with. Actually, Happy New Year to everybody. Happy New Year to you guys as well. Granted, we are recording this, as mentioned earlier, on the 11th. But the reason why we chose this movie is because the climax kind of takes place on New Year's Eve. So it's closest to New Year's Eve day we could watch without needing to watch 200 Cigarettes again.
I'm getting ready. It's like literally sitting right here.
Why?
Excellent.
No,
Every
not
year.
no.
Every year I watch it.
I would rather do an annual review of 4 Rooms than I would 200 Cigarettes. But that would get redundant.
Great movie, though.
It is. I think doing any one movie repeatedly, though, like more than one review, is a little much. You know.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
For sure.
So that was Ghostbusters. We'll be back next week with a new episode. We're going to be reviewing the classic Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It'll be a fun episode. Be sure to tune in next week. If you're listening on Spotify, you can check the YouTube version out, Flesh Wound Features, and pay attention to Flesh Wound Farce, airing every Monday at 6 p.m. Greg, Todd, anything else before we head out for the evening?
Hang on to that trophy.
Okay, I will hold on to this trophy. I'm going to hold it in my hands, as I will say. One final thing is that I had a soda there and it got leaked, and I'm worried that this isn't like some kind of temporal time displacement slime, and it actually is trying to disappear. And now I'm going to probably like hold it close. So I will say,
don't give the next guy a sticky trophy.
I will say that if you are inclined to join me at trivia, I will be hosting this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tuesday at the brewery in Placentia at 7 o'clock. Wednesday at Griffin's Grill at Los Alamitos at 7:30. And the Honey Pot Meadery in Anaheim at 7:30. And if you were there last Thursday, you would have seen me watch the Raiders completely blow it with a microphone in my hand. You would not believe the amount of restraint I had.
You're right.
Like,
I don't believe it.
that final drive with Baker Mayfield, and I'm literally like this. I have a list question. I'm reading out albums or music artists and their years, and it was supposed to be albums, and I literally froze. First time I've ever froze with a microphone in my hand. It's because I saw Baker Mayfield come back to life. Thank you, the Raiders, for being the Lazarus Pit of the NFL. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is world famous juggler Greg Larson and Flesh Wound producer Todd. And of course, by this time, who knows what could happen? Greg, we have, by this time this airs, where are we at the we got the Raiders in the Vegas bet. So by the time next episode, actually I'm already trailing. I'm ranting. I'm ranting and raving. I don't know. My brain is going faster than my mouth. So that's like a slap in the face. And it's not like a slap in the face, like out of disrespect. It's a slap in the face of get on with it. End the show. Ladies and gentlemen, a quick addendum. Now, we've been teasing this wager that Greg and I had for the Raiders and the 49ers. That game, that's wager that'll determine whether or not we have to review Lost Skeleton of Cadaver 2. That game takes place this Sunday, January 1st, New Year's Day. So what we're going to do is on January 2nd, we're going to have a live episode. We're going to watch and review, or rather review and discuss the Water Boy themed. And we're going to go over the results of this wager, and we'll determine if we need to watch Lost Skeleton of Cadaver Part 2, or if Greg has to admit that Die Hard is one of the top 3 greatest Christmas movies of all time, not just on this show, but for his life. That is his life now. So, and again, as a reminder, if the 49ers win, we have to watch Lost Skeleton of Cadaver 2. If the Raiders win, Greg has to admit that Die Hard is one of the top 3 greatest Christmas movies of all time. That will be his life. The reason I'm clutching my fantasy football trophy is because by the time that live episode goes, I'll know if this trophy is going to be home with me. So tune in next week to see me flip out either way, because I'm either going to be really happy or I'm going to be really pissed. That's for sure. All right. You guys have anything else before we head out for the evening?
I
Alrighty.
say that be prepared to do some science and the Animala dance.
Oh,
Because Ozzy, it's gonna happen.
And stay tuned for Lost Cadaver 2.
oh my
That's
God.
right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is world famous juggler Greg Larson and Flesh Room producer Todd. I'm Ozzy V. We'll see you next week. Hopefully, I'll still be champion.